Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Hina Dixit, who is a software engineer leader with 12 plus years of experience in software engineering. Hina led a team at Apple for 8 years with a focus on multiple projects ranging from security, iCloud, artificial intelligence, developer tools, and data integrity. She currently drives all investments in the field of artificial intelligence and metaverse at SamsungNext. So, Hina, it's a complete pleasure and complete honor to have you on the show. Really appreciate you giving time and being part of the podcast. The introduction, what I gave was something which I pulled off from the net and I kind of edited it. But you have had a fantastic journey, a pre-conversation. You started from Kanpur and then you went to US and did AI courses and you were part of Apple. I mean, would love to hear your journey from your own mouth, your intro, your background.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eddie. It's a pleasure meeting you. And it's an honor to be here with you and be able to share my story and talk a little bit about Metaverse and SamsungNext at the same time. So a little bit about myself as we were talking earlier. So I'm from Kanpur and I'm born and brought up in Kanpur. I did my undergrad from Modi Institute of Technology and Science and Computer Science. Then I moved to US to pursue my master's from Santa Clara University. And I also did some of my graduate coursework in specialization in AI from Stanford University. I kind of have been doing multiple things over the past decade. I have been in various areas of software engineering, and that's why I think I have a very varied and very generalist kind of background. I was earlier, initially my first job was at Symantec. I was there for 2 years, and after that, I was at Apple for around 8 years. And like you kindly introduced me, I focused on various projects within Apple, which included AI, security, Xcode, UI kit, and also I was focused on other features, some of the core features photos, for example, right? Mail, messages, find my iPhone. So some of the very, very cool apps I got to work on, and some of the very cool teams within Apple. I was very lucky to work with them. And currently, I'm working with SamsungNext. I'm currently leading AI investments, and I'm focusing on metaverse investments as well.
Lovely. How cool is that? But tell me, with Samsung, you said, for 8 years, you were there as a software engineer. What's the story behind transitioning from Apple Semantic to an investor?
Yeah. Actually, the story is very simple. I'm just a person who's driven by knowledge and learning and experiences. I'm an explorer by nature, so I love to learn. Whenever I feel like I'm in a room where I am the person who knows the most, I'll move away from that room. And that has been the case with me for entire decade. I was constantly working to do something new, learn something new, and I was very driven. And that's why I got to work on various projects at the same time. I kind of wanted to do UI. I wanted to learn backend and how human interface team works, or how various APIs are written, how does the AR team works. The knowledge was something that moved me. And even within Apple, I was constantly trying to do new things. I would go and create my own projects and in AI, and I'll get them sanctioned by the management teams, and I'll go and talk to Craig about them in the meetings, and he'll say, yeah, that's a great idea. And I'll pitch that back to my managers, and I'll continue learning. And I was very lucky, because my managers and my mentors were amazing at Apple, and they constantly encouraged me to go and learn whatever I wanted to. So there was never a hurdle there in terms of learning. And I led a team at Apple for around 8 years, and then I kind of still wanted to do more somehow. I felt that it would be amazing if I can start mentoring more people outside of Apple. And I kind of didn't feel comfortable, given I had a key position at Apple, and I was exposed to a lot of secret information, and it was very difficult for me and to feel comfortable to talk to other people, and like, be able to mentor them and guide them. And like, it would always go in back of my mind, like, am I not, like, am I not doing anything crazy here? Like, am I supposed to do this? But at the same time, like, I learned a lot at Apple. Because I was so driven when it came to mentoring, I started doing angel investing on site. And that's where my investment journey started. So I invested in two startups. One is Evento, the other one is Arahi, that's in the Bay Area. And both these startups like are focused in AI, and one is focused on, like, just trying to do some cool metaverse stuff in event space. So yeah, so I was very driven with that. And eventually, like, SamsungNext opportunity showed up. I was also reached out by other VC firms as well, but this was amazing. And especially because, like, David Lee is currently heading SamsungNext, and David was the managing director at SP Angels with Ron Conway. And he has invested in some of the most amazing companies like Twitter, Airbnb, DoorDash, Snapchat, I think. I'll have to check for that one. But some of the very, very key companies he invested on. So it was a pleasure, like, to talk to him. And I spent an hour talking to him. And he was like, yeah, like, you can learn a lot. You can grow a lot in this role. So I was like, yeah, why not? Like, if I'm getting a chance to learn from somebody like that, why would I say no to this opportunity? So I moved to SamsungNext, and so far the journey has been amazing.
What you said in the beginning of the conversation is so profound. You said, when in a room, when you know that, that you can't learn more, you move out, and lifelong learning, I think is the mantra. I think students, entrepreneurs who are listening, I think the key takeaway should be that, you need to constantly upgrade yourself. Yes, there is so much of content out there, but I think, you should funnel it to a way which would be productive for you, which would be helpful for you in your personal life and your business life. And you need to constantly learn, I guess, and that's the only way to go about it. And yes, I mean, you've done some really amazing things on a personal capacity. You have invested in Eventown, and so tell me, with SamsungNext, why choose the sector artificial intelligence and metaverse?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about AI and AR. Those two areas have been very, very, like, interesting to me, especially like when I took classes at Stanford. I kind of like learned from, like, Andrew Ng was my professor, and I saw that, okay, we need to focus on data centric AI. The data is the new problem. And I kind of like am seeing a lot of startups in these particular space, but at the same time, like, I want to be able to recognize them, right? And from my personal capacity and learning and experience, I'm well versed with recognizing a tech innovation when I see one. And especially like AI and AR, and since, like, it's my passion, I continue to follow that. And at the same time, AI and metaverse are very important sector area for Samsung itself, right? And especially metaverse. The metaverse actually presents a very big opportunity for Samsung media. And media has always been very important to Samsung as a premium manufacturer, right? Like, they have their phones, they have various platforms using which, like, media is actually viewed by several, like, people, Android users out there, right? Like, in Android, Samsung is the leader. So its successor, the metaverse, is specifically, like, it's very, very important to Samsung, given there's a fundamental shift going on from, like, web 2 to web 3. We see that metaverse will entail like a huge opportunity for us to tap in. And that's why, like, we are committed to metaverse completely at this point.
Lovely, yeah, because yes, I think, the metaverse, the what is gonna be the evolution of the computer, from the transition from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, the spatial computing, us being moving away from a restricted 2D interface to a 3D world, us being able to interact with the or digital objects, to have digital avatars which could get intelligent, us being transitioning into a world which is interoperable, open, decentralized. I mean, these words, it's so loaded. I mean, because of internet for the longest time was, hidden behind paywalls, and it was a walled garden. But this Web 3.0 is going to be a decentralized, open world. So uh, it's exciting, but at the same time, I think it must be extremely scary for those traditional legacy uh, institutions, which has always always tried to squeeze out uh, as much from the consumers. But I think with the metaverse, the entire language, or the Web 3.0 entire language of how we consume and do business is going to change, because there the consumer itself becomes the builder of the next world. So it's exciting, but I don't really know how it's going to pan out. So on your personal capacity, you mentioned that you had invested in Eventhow and Arai. How does that learning apply to Samsung Next? And what do you look for in an AI or a metaverse startup when making an investment?
First of all, answering your question that, okay, like, it's very scary. Like, there are these terms being thrown around, right? Like, there's Web 3.0, there's spatial computing, there's like, decentralization. But I think like a very easy way to understand this and to kind of like, make this less scary is to pursue it from a very like, very basic definition. And for me, I tend to pursue metaverse from John Radov's wider view that a metaverse is an environment in which real world limitations ascribed to physical space, objects, and time are dematerialized, right? So when you stick to something like this, then you start seeing, okay, we are like somewhat already using various metaverse related entities, and Siri is one of them, phone call is one of them, Zoom is one of them, right? You're actually like, you're just kind of like dematerializing the connection to the physical space. It's liberating, right? So whatever technology liberates you from the physical space, right, that is part of metaverse already in some way. So, and coming from like, user perspective, especially during the COVID era, uh, people were like, in their houses, they were like in shelter placed, and people wanted to connect to like, other people and have like, some sort of semblance to their real life, like which was pre-COVID life. And some of the very like, tools like Zoom or like, Oculus was a good getaway for people to have some semblance to their previous lives, right? So I kind of like feel that this journey of like transitioning from the normal like, like now to a world of metaverse is not something that will happen right now, or it's beginning to happen right now. It has been happening for some time now. At the same time, it will continue to like happen slowly and smoothly, just like, we kind of integrated basic technology like phone, right? Like, or seeing videos. At the same time, like if you look at the past, there is a movie in which like a train arrives in the platform. It's like very very old movie. It's one of the first movies, and when people went to see that movie, they were all scared that, oh my god, the train is coming here. And it's hilarious, like, because at that time even a video film was a big deal, right? And it seemed like, oh my god, and scared people. And it like, it integrate like it intrigued them. And but at the same time, like now it's video or phone or like Zoom calls. These are just part of our lives, right? So similarly, Samsung Next wants to constantly like look for startups or founders who want to try like, solving various real life problems or like, pain points of customers using seamless solutions. And I think that is the most important point here, that the solution has to be seamless, right? And it doesn't mean like, the next generation of technology will have to be like something, or you wear big glasses, you go in like, virtual reality, and obviously you want to make it more seamless. And that's why, like, people are working on various solutions like, contact lens or Neuralink, right, for example, or have using EMG and neural interfaces, which can be triggered by only slight finger movements, or these will allow you to control devices or communicate or collaborate with others almost as simply as thinking, right? Like, it should be as seamless as possible. So I kind of like saw the same, like, while I was investing, or while we are working on various solutions in at Ariahi or Evento, right? Like, what the founders are trying to understand or build is how consumers want to use metaverse solutions, right? How are they going to absorb it? How can they make it seamless? How can they help solve a particular problem? And I think that's the very key thing that we look when we are trying to make an investment, is we want founders as well as us to understand the pain point very well. Once you understand, okay, this is a pain point, then you move to the solution of, like, the solution itself. Okay, what's the solution now? What is the technical innovation here? What is the moat here? What is the technical differentiation, right? And you try to understand, okay, how can it, like, impact economy? How can it impact consumer behavior? What is the go to market fit? So I tend to look at like multiple things when I'm investing in companies. And obviously, like, I'll say one thing, that I'm constantly looking for boldest founders, or the crazy ones who want to go and change the world.
Lovely. I think it always starts with that 1% of the population who dares to be bold enough and go against the tide and create a product which completely changes the world. I think you said something very, very important while describing the metaverse. John Radoff says that obviously the anything that breaks down the real world limitations is like the metaverse, because that's what the metaverse is going to do. It's going to allow you to do those and be whoever you want. And you mentioned something very profound, that any tech that liberates you is a metaverse of sorts, and we already have those kind of platform. And you also mentioned that the black and white film, the first black and white film with the train entering the station, and I think it was being shown in a Paris theater, or the full packed theater. And so some of the crowd actually, when the train came close to, the screen was, those guys actually jumped and ran out of the theater. And I guess the metaverse is something like that. We just understanding the language of it. It could be possibly, the metaphorically, you could say that it's the first phone, that only thing that it could do, was the clunky thing, was just make calls. But right now we cannot do without it. So maybe metaverse in the next few years could do that. It could just define the language of how we communicate, interact, do business, and so many other things. I mean, sticking to this metaverse thing also, because it's got such a huge hype right now. How do you think that metaverse is going to transform a society? What do you think are the low hanging fruits, or maybe in the long term, what are going to be the benefits of metaverse?
I think first thing that we have to understand is, like, the biggest challenge has always been like connecting with people, right? Like, so how realistic those connections can be, how realistic these immersive experiences can be. So basically, like, metaverse, I kind of like divide it into the 7 layers. That includes like experience, discovery, this creator economy, this spatial computing, decentralization, and human interface, along with infrastructure, right? Like, how are you even going to build this metaverse, right? So those are some of the, like, key spaces where some changes will need to happen, or some new solutions will need to come, especially like infrastructure. Like, for example, we invested in Alchemy, and Alchemy is I think currently valued around 10 billion. They recently raised around, we invested in them, and they are like, they are very easy to use Web3 based app builder. It's basically like going to be Apache for Web3. So we are very proud of that investment. And similarly, like we have invested in some of the infrastructure, like other key pieces as well. We are constantly focusing on creator economy, and like keeping that in mind, we want to like focus on startups which produce synthetic media, right? Like, can you produce 3D worlds, like, using artificial intelligence or procedural generation or GANs of some kind, using like, Unity or Unreal. So looking at such startups, like first of all, first step would be to create infrastructure tools for creating such dApps. Once you have these infrastructure tools in place, then obviously, like, you will start focusing on the human interface as well as like, the experiences, the immersive experiences out there. How can you like, uh, give those immersive experience, and at the same time like help boost the content creation? Or is there a way to automate that content creation? Like, can synthetic media, play a significant role there? So yeah, so I think those are some of the initial key pieces of the metaverse that we currently like foresee as, okay, these are going to be the key pieces in order to build the future.
You spoke about Alchemy. Would you want to touch some other portfolio startups and how they are creating innovation?
I think we have several great startups at this point. Yuga Labs is one of them, and Yuga Labs is basically house a Bored Ape yacht club, and like it's a very cool NFT. I absolutely love them. I'm also seeing like, a lot of other great startups. Sandbox is there, for example. We invested in Sandbox, which is like virtual lands, right? And we invested in Proof of Learn. Proof of Learn is basically a Web3 education platform with a mission to unlock accessible, high quality education across the world using blockchain. And what is cool about it is that it has learn to earn protocols. Basically, you learn and you earn like in form of some NFT or virtual goods or something like that, right? So I really like that app as well. And then there is, obviously, like we spoke about the Sandbox, and then there are a bunch of like, other portcos that we have invested in. Spatial is one of them. So very proud of all the portcos that we have invested on, and we invested in around 90 companies just last year.
These startups are completely upending or redefining or the way we used to possibly educate ourselves, or healthcare, or the infrastructure. Like, I mean, even
Yeah.
Proof of Learn you mentioned. I mean, it's completely upending of the education. With the learn to earn,
Yeah.
you're saying that you will be incentivized to learn. Now, how
Yeah.
cool is that? So, I mean, we're getting into such a beautiful space, because I think the next few years, the kind of products that are going to come up is going to really play a huge role in the evolution of mankind. So I'm super excited for that, and that's the reason I do this podcast in my small capacity, to kind of spread awareness about all the cool things that's happening, and people like yourself, being part of that movement. So wish you and your team the very best. Coming back to SamsungNext, would you like to share detail on the investment size? I mean, do you do seed, pre-seed? Because I mean, at least here in India, most of the startups are still in MVP stage. So
Yeah.
so would you like to share details on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Samsung Next is basically like a venture capital arm of Samsung itself, right? Like, and we have other two venture initiatives as well. But Samsung Next is focused on early stage investments. That includes anything between like, from pre-seed to Series B. And those are our sweet spots. And that's why, like, even if like a startup is at MVP stage, it's fine as long as like they have a great idea and they have like some sort of like, technical differentiation or the mode well defined. For example, like, while we were talking about various apps, and various portcos. I also wanted to mention this very cool, portco that we have. It's called Dang Bank. It's basically like meme economy. So you can have meme and NFTs as well. So you don't have to have a final product, or you don't need to have a huge customer base to reach out to us. You can just reach out to us anytime, and I'm more than happy and willing to look at the pitch deck or whatever, like white page that you have. Even if you don't have a pitch deck, that's fine. A lot of YC companies I've worked with, they didn't have a pitch deck, and that was fine. We still invested in them because they had great idea, they had like great solution, they had a great thought. So that's more important. And our check size is anywhere between 100K to $1 million. $1 million is reserved for a much later stages, like Series A or Series B or Series C, in some cases. So more than welcome. It never hurts to knock a door and ask questions. So even like that's my advice to entrepreneurs out there, right? Like if you see somebody's in the space, reach out, see what you can learn from them. Schedule like a 15-minute or 30-minute call with them, get to learn from them, ask your questions, feel free, and find mentors and your allies out there, right? Because that is very important.
I think because of the internet, it has given you the freedom to reach out to anyone. And there are so many entrepreneurs, mentors, advisors who are more than happy to kind of, share advice, So tell me, what does Samsung Next bring on board besides the capital?
Yeah, so we have a platform team. We have an in-house platform team whom are just dedicated to our podcast. They don't do anything specific to SamsungNext team, but they are just dedicated to our podcast. And we have in-house HR, legal, sales, business development, events, marketing. All these services in our platform services are included, and these are free of cost for our podcast. So if you're a new startup, you want to come up with a marketing campaign, we're more than happy to help you out, devise that marketing campaign for you, and give you suggestions and ideas, and connect you with the right people, and set up a stage for you, and help you out in any way we can. And that's why David's vision is to build solid relationships with the founders. And it's not much about the profits, or he's more about, hey, I want to build a community. I want to build strong relationships out there. So that's why we have a dedicated platform service team. So that's the biggest help or differentiation that Samsung Next can bring on board, apart from the check size, right? And apart from this, I mean, there are several MDs who have amazing experience. For example, Raymond Liao, who's my manager and he's VP. He was CTO at Siemens. David was he was at SV Angels. He started business development initiative within Google, is what I think Google Ventures now. But he was one of the founding members, right? And then there are a bunch of other people who have years and years of experience, like Brandon Kim, right? So these are some amazing leaders. They have amazing network. They have seen various startups build right from scratch, for example Twitter, right? And David invested in them. So he knows people. It's so easy, you talk to him about any big unicorn CEO. So he would say, oh yeah, I know that person. He was 19 when we met the first time, when I invested in his company. So he brings that kind of leadership and networking and resources with him. So it's very helpful. And at the same time, since obviously we are a separate entity, but we are still part of Samsung. So we can open doors for our portcos to collaborate with Samsung business units. And we cannot promise that, okay, the teams will, eventually work with you, but hey, we can facilitate those conversations, and that can take some time, to kind of build some MVP that can help with a certain business unit. But we can start those conversations within Samsung as well. So obviously that is another plus point that we have.
So tell me, I mean, most of the portfolio that I saw on your website seems to be, which is largely US based. I mean, are you guys looking at the emerging markets such as India, Africa, and China?
Yeah, absolutely. We are actually, as of now, especially like I am starting to focus on Indian startups as well. I'm starting to meet a lot of like Indian founders and started to like, kind of figure out, okay, how to go about it, how to like find cool founders. And I that's why like I'm trying to engage with various founders from various parts of the world, even if they are from like Vietnam or Singapore or China. I'm still like engaged with them, because for us we want to like kind of focus on the right portcos, right companies, right startups, the right solutions, right? That is more important. Where they come from, that is not as important, right? So obviously China and India is like it's key emerging market, and we are definitely focused on that. And at the same time, we are also like, we have a team in Tel Aviv as well, who kind of like focus in that like Israel area as well for us.
The Web 3.0 metaverse is going to be a digital world where I don't think boundaries will exist, and there is so much cool innovations happening across the world. And me being vested in the AR VR space, I see some fantastic startups over here who trying to push the boundaries. And because India is such a huge market, 1.3 billion people, if we
I know.
create a product over here, I mean, there you've got $1 billion waiting for you. So exciting things. Is there any advice specifically to the Indian startups over here? What should they do to kind of, create an innovative product which they could scale not just in India but possibly maybe all around the world?
Understand the pain point very well and understand the solution, right? Like what works in India might not work somewhere else, but at the same time make your solution scalable enough that, okay, like it can work in India today, but it can work in US as well. And that's the first way, right? Like that's how you should build your products. And that's one tip that I would like to give to people: to make your solution scalable. Have like package or like platform for localization. Have platform like don't write very very like cohesive code. Like make sure that you are kind of like writing microservices based architecture, where you can like kind of customize it to various countries. You can customize the look and feel of your like app. That is the easy part. But from the infrastructure perspective, yeah, you should be able to say, yeah, this my solution is scalable. And that is very important when building a solution, right? uh, the other thing I would say is focus on like some of the very basic pain points, right? Like I think once you understand the pain points very well, you can apply the solution anywhere, right? That's the first step. Like for example, if we were to talk about metaverse, like if you're creating an immersive solution, right? uh, you have to think about it. Is it scalable? Like what is the pain point? What is the particular like problem that people of various vicinity kind of like are facing right now, and then try to come up with a solution. So that's a good way to go about it.
Lovely. Hina, you have been vested in the tech space, the cutting edge tech space for over a decade plus. Now your journey is in the investment space. Technology, I think, is growing exponentially. There are so many pros, it's loaded, it's going to create a great future for mankind. But then there's that other side, which is a little scary, deepfakes, GANs, biotech, metaverse, the digital identity conversation. What is it that's on your priority list which worries you the most when it's the conversation about frontier tech going to fringe elements and create disruption?
Yeah, I think deepfakes is obviously one of them, right? Like especially copyright infringement for NFTs. People are spending like a lot of money to get these NFTs, but at the same time, like people are copying NFTs. They're like trying to do copyright infringement, and that's something that's a current plague right now, that for which like we are constantly looking for good solutions. So obviously like deepfakes are a big one, and NFT copyrights are the second one. And obviously privacy, security, the user experience, the diversity and inclusion, that's also like one of the key pieces when it comes to like user experience, right? You want to make sure whatever application that you're building, it's secure. It has like best privacy practices embedded into it. For example, like if you're like trying to, you know, kind of work with cross organizations, or like, you're trying to have the data, you're storing the data, how can you make that, okay, the data is encrypted, or how do you like, expose the data to some other, team or individual, without exposing the customer data to them? How can they train their AI models on that? So you can use a lot of methods, like federated learning is there, MPC is there, or split NN is there, or differential privacy, right? Like, there are a bunch of methods for that. I think an overall awareness is needed. When startup founders are trying to work on various solutions, they kind of like overlook these as the last step. But at the same time, privacy and inclusion and these security practices, they should be part of like of your entire development journey rather than the last step. Right? Once it's part of your journey, it's part of your development journey, then you'll think of security at each step. You're working on the database side, you'll think about, okay, like how do I store my data like in more secure way? What are some of the ways to write the API securely, right? How do I kind of like make sure, when you're doing the front end, how do I make sure that I'm inclusive to other communities, right? How do you like define your policies and user agreements and the legalities? So I think it should be like an agile method, instead of like the last step, like a waterfall. It should be part of the solution journey instead of like the end step. Okay, now I have made the solution, now let me think about the privacy and security practices. That shouldn't be the case.
If we incorporate all of those necessary things while we are building the app, I don't think we will have any problems.
Yeah.
You, Hina, have started your journey from Kanpur, then Santa Clara, Stanford University, Apple, Samsung's Next now. You've done some amazing thing. What comes next for you, and what's the future roadmap for Samsung Next?
Yeah, so I mean, currently I'm still like, I'll be focused on AI and metaverse for some time within SamsungNext. And we're completely focused on, three very key pieces, like this creator economy, the content generation, the automation of content generation, obviously immersive experiences there, and synthetic media, like I mentioned. And those are some of the important areas that we'll be focused on for some very long time, I think for a few months at least, like next 1 or 1.5 years, right? And seeing various solutions in that. And for me right now, the priority is to kind of learn the pain points of the consumers and understand the market better. I've been working on investment thesis for AI, and I've been trying to like ramp up the investment thesis for metaverse, and understanding, okay, how do we want to perceive this? Especially that requires a lot of like research work. You need to know the consumer, you need to know the methods, you need to know like what other leaders are saying. So yeah, so I've been like ramping up that, and yeah, I'm almost finished with our AI investment thesis. So yeah, so I think next few months are going to be just reaching out to various founders, school founders, and getting them on board as a portco.
Lovely, Hina. Really appreciate you taking time, being part of the podcast, sharing your insights. Keep doing what you're doing. I think, yes, we're getting into an exciting world. Artificial intelligence, metaverse, blockchain, Web 3.0, all of these converging technologies are going to open up huge opportunities. It's that 1% of entrepreneurs who kind of are bold and bold enough to find that problem which that they can solve, and there are so many problems out there. We can create fantastic products. I mean, so yes, there's huge opportunities. Thank you for being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eddie.